So if members of Congress decide they want to do something about Russian election interference and the president's last 48 hours, what are the options? Let's go. They could find a way to impose more sanctions on Russia on top of the ones they've already passed. One bipartisan bill being talked about would require severe sanctions if the Kremlin does interfere in another federal election. Congress could hold hearings to try and get more information about what was really said inside that one-on-one between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. At least one senator, by the way, wants to hear specifically from the U.S. interpreter in that room. Congress could also do something with less teeth, maybe pass a non-binding resolution in support of the intelligence community, or they could go to the extreme. Republican Senator Cory Gardner has a headline-grabbing bill that would force the State Department to decide within 90 days whether Russia should be listed as a state sponsor of terror. And then there's the super extreme option. Congress could censure the president over his comments in Helsinki. It's basically a formal reprimand, something that has not happened since 1834. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California, member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for being on. So of the options that we just talked about and laid out here, what do you see, if any, of being the most realistic, something that Congress could do this summer, this month, over the next few months about what happened in Helsinki?
Well, first, doing nothing is not an option to protect the ballot box. I think this
But wait a second, it is an option. Congress could do nothing. That's also an option on the table.
You're absolutely right. But if we want to have a secure election, that's not acceptable to the American people. Just this week, the Appropriations Committee on the Republican side zeroed out the election security budget. So we had about $330 million budgeted for election security, and they took that out of the budget. So we have a vote this week to put that back in. So pass those appropriations. Protect the Mueller investigation. Show the Russians that we're serious about this. We're not going to let the president insult that investigation at this conference and then see it undermined here. The Senate has already passed out of the Senate Judiciary bipartisan legislation to do that. Also, Hallie, we can pass the independent commission resolution that Elijah Cummings and I worked on. It has bipartisan support as well. Take this out of a politically charged environment that is Congress. Put it in the hands of elders and experts like your former guest, your past guest, Michael Chertoff.
Right.
Those type of people, put them on the commission and make reforms.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.